Well, good evening to each and every one of you. I'm Will Fox. I'm the pastor here at Gateway, and we're going to begin this meeting tonight with a word of prayer. Father, we're so thankful that we're citizens of this great nation. And Lord, as this meeting is conducted tonight, I pray in this house of worship that it be done in an orderly and a respectful way. Father, I pray for all of our appointed leaders, all of our elected leaders, that, Father, you give them wisdom to make decisions that will cause this country to be strengthened and prosper. I pray that, Father, each and every one of us as individuals so live our life in a manner that it would increase the integrity of this great nation. Father, we ask these things in the name of your Son, Jesus. Amen. Amen. Two scouts that's going to come, Bradley and Cody, and I'm going to do the Pledge of Allegiance tonight.
Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now for the Texas. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state under God, one indivisible. You may be seated.
Thank you, gentlemen. My name is Paul Cote, and I'm with the Rayford Civic Association, and we're so thankful for all of y'all attending this evening. We thank you, and we're thankful for Pastor Fox for allowing the opportunity for Congressman Brady to make a presentation to y'all this evening. The Rayford Road Civic Association, as you may know already, is a group of individuals from our zip code 77386 that have come together to say it's time for us to have a voice. And I'm going to keep it very simple, but we are offering memberships to individuals. We will offer sponsorships to businesses in the area. And we will also, what we really like is to bring those government people that are like the MUD districts and the different taxing entities in the area together so that we can all work together to get in front of what's happening in our area and not to get so far behind it like we are right now. So, to bring that, we also want to work with our county commissioner with these items. And tonight, I have James Nowak here, and he's going to come up here. Precinct 3 Commissioner James Nowak.
Thank you very much. I certainly appreciate the opportunity to be here. And pastors, thank you so much for opening the doors of your church so our congressman can come here and give us an update. And Congressman, it's a great honor to be able to introduce you. You have led this county and you have led the great state of Texas in a way that we should all be very proud of, and your conservative values ringing through up in Washington. That's why we elected you. Kevin Brady is proud to represent the 8th District of Texas in the U.S. House of Representatives. Kevin is the chairman of the Joint Economic Committee and a senior member of the Ways and Means Committee, where he can give Texans in our region a greater voice in issues like healthcare, taxes, and trade. Kevin is a pro-family, pro-business conservative, and his strong belief in free enterprise guides him as he has taken a leading role in shaping comprehensive pro-growth tax reform. In Congress, Kevin has repeatedly been named Hero of the Taxpayers, Small Business Champion, and Super Friend to the seniors. Most of all, Kevin never moved to Washington. He's remained here in the Woodlands. He commutes to his job and lives in Montgomery County with his wife, Kathy, their 2 sons, Will and Sean. If you will please join with me in welcoming our Congressman, Kevin Brady.
Commissioner, thanks. Thanks so much for the introduction, but more importantly, I just want to thank you for your service. I know you put a high priority in South Montgomery County, your precinct, on transportation, on quality of life, on public safety, and more importantly, watching out for taxpayer dollars. So would you join me in thanking our commissioner for their service? Rick, I want to thank you for opening your beautiful church here. I've been to South Montgomery County a long time. We were visiting beforehand, but I recall when there was nothing but trees from the railroad track to Fox Run. Not much in between. Now you look at the communities, you look at the businesses, you just look at the schools, everything going on here, but everyone needs a spiritual home. I mean, everyone needs that connection, that relationship, that personal connection to God, and a place where families can gather to do that. Pastor, you've created a beautiful home here, so thank you again for all that you do. Paul, the Rayford Road Civic Association, boy, this is a good idea whose time has come. You know, just look at the growth of neighborhoods here. The impact, you know, the roads have, you know, in public safety. Be able to work with our leaders on these issues that are important to us as a family and to communities, that's just so critical. And being able to speak and listen and talk about this with one voice is really important. So, Paul, where'd you go? Back there. Thank you for your leadership. You're doing a great job. James mentioned this, but one of the best decisions I ever made was to not move to Washington. My wife and I live here in South Montgomery County, the Woodlands. We adopted two little boys who now are 14 and 11. One's going into College Park High School. That's kind of tough, okay? The other one's starting 5th grade. My wife is excited this summer is over. Really excited this summer's over. But I didn't move because I didn't want to move 1,200 miles away. I didn't want to get out of touch with the communities and the neighborhoods and the families that I represent and work for. And we wanted our boys to be raised as Texans. We wanted them to understand, you know, that bubble up there isn't the real America. This is real America. And so staying home here, being grounded, allows you to see me at baseball practice and dry cleaners and the grocery store. And it allows me to we're sort of known for holding more than 50 town hall meetings a year. And I do that to hold myself accountable to you, those I work for. It also allows me to sort of educate you on what the key issues are up there, but for you to educate me on the issues important to you. So today, I wanted to lead off, at least, this town hall with something that's coming forward this fall that you may not have heard about. It has a big impact on your life, tax reform. And I've got some questions I need to ask you about that. But after that, I want to open it up so we can talk about anything that's on your mind, from Obamacare, the IRS investigation, which my committee is helping lead, to immigration, to anything you want to do. So with your permission, I don't have a clicker, so we're going to do this as I say next, but let's talk about taxes. In my view, is that perhaps besides our spiritual faith, the biggest challenge facing America is we have a country that's not living within its means. The debt and deficits that are being passed down to our children are just immoral. Spending cuts can get us half the way there. But for us to get back to a balanced budget and starting paying off the debt, we've got to grow this economy. We've got to get back on track. Because right now, Texas is doing great, but the rest of the country, they're really struggling. This tax code, reforming it, the first reform since Ronald Reagan did it in the 1980s, could help jumpstart this economy. So with your permission, let's talk first about tax reform. This is a cartoon, the scientists peering into the super collider, saying we're trying to recreate conditions at the beginning of the universe when the tax code was understanding, which is about right. Next. On the Ways and Means Committee, we handle all the tax code, and what I've come to realize, it's too costly, it's too complex, but most of all, it's just too unfair. It's unfair to families. It's impossible to understand 4 million words. 72,000 pages. As one person said, it's 10 times the size of the Bible with none of the good news, which I think is probably right. It's time consuming. An average family in South Montgomery County here spends 13 hours just gathering all their tax information data before you put it on TurboTax or before you go to your tax preparer to help you. You can't keep up with the changes. The last decade, 4,000 changes to the tax code. That's nearly one a day. Who can keep up with it? And when you do try to keep up with that, for example, we're saving for college for our boys. There's 15 different higher education provisions in the tax code, different ways to save, deduct interest, do this and do that. Who knows which one's right for you? The simple guide for those 15 higher education provisions is 90 pages long. The simple explanation is 90 pages long. And as you know, if you make a mistake on your taxes, the IRS is absolutely unforgiving. And if you've ever been on the other end of that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Next. Here's a chart that shows how our tax code has grown. The bottom, 1913, it was 400 pages long, a paperback novel. Boy, we wish that were the case today. It's now, look, in the last 10 years, it's nearly doubled in size. Again, tinkered with it seems like every day. It's just too big. Next. The tax code, I think, is also unfair to businesses. 9 out of 10 businesses, they have to hire a tax preparer to help them keep up with all the tax changes. Many small businesses actually pay higher taxes than big businesses. Think about that. Smaller businesses pay higher taxes than a big business. That's because many big businesses file as corporations in the tax code. But our small businesses, many of them file as you and I do, as individuals, sole proprietorships, partnerships, what they call S corporations, small corporations. So they actually can pay a higher rate, 44.6. It's called 44.5% would be their highest rate. Big business, it's a lower rate, 35%. That's not fair. American businesses find it harder and harder to compete around the world because our tax code now is the worst on the planet. We used to have a pretty competitive one, but not long. We have the highest tax rate for businesses in the world. Worse than that, am I the only one with allergies in Texas these days? Because it feels like it. We're one of the few countries left in the modern world that taxes our companies here in the United States, and then we tax them when they compete around the world as well. We double tax them. None of our competitors do this. As a result, it's tough to compete, but here's what's even worse. If a Houston company, if a Montgomery County company, Anadarko, CB&I, these companies, our local companies compete around the world, when they compete and win, and Terry, they make a profit, we tax them to bring the profit home and reinvest it back here in Montgomery County. We actually punish companies when they try to bring money home and invest in a new job or new research or a new building here in our community. That just makes no sense at all. And as a result, our tax code forces jobs overseas. That's unfair. This next chart is a little hard to read, but the red chart or bar is America. All the ones on the bottom are all our competitors. The green, light green bars at the top, that's what these countries taxed, their tax rate 10 years ago. The blue charts are what they've all lowered them to. France, Italy, Spain, Greece, all of Europe, others. Look at them. They've all lowered the rates, but not us. As a result, it is tough for our local businesses to compete in a world where competition is on you every day. Next chart, please. Finally, I think this tax code is unfair to America. We waste as a nation $168 billion each and every year trying to keep up with this tax code. It makes it really hard to start a small business because it's so complex. We're falling behind China, in Europe and others. We're losing jobs and sales. And that's of particular importance to us in our region because no state in the country sells or ships more around the world than Texas. And no region in the country sells and ships more around the world than our Houston region. So when we can't compete overseas, it costs us jobs right here in our communities with our neighbors. It doesn't have to be that way. We know that when President Reagan reformed the code 30 years ago, made it simpler, made it fair, made it flatter, that he created 1 million U.S. jobs in the first year. Not total, in the first year. And experts tell us if we can do it right again, we can do the same thing for our economy. When you add those jobs, you generate that tax revenue, along with spending cuts. That puts us back to living within our means as a country, and that's key. Next, please. So what are we waiting for? You know, I think about a code for us. I think for America, our code ought to be built for growth. It ought to be built for the growth of your family, for your business, for America's economy. We need a tax code that is simpler and fair, but that protects you as taxpayers, not a bunch of special interests. It ought to help America compete and win. I think that ought to be the priority. In the next chart, as I've worked on this through the years, I've really thought through what are my principles for reform. It has to start with making codes simpler and fair and flatter. That's got to be the beginning. We need to close loopholes and limit deductions so we can lower tax rates for everybody. The reason I say that is because if this podium represents the taxes we collect in America, we exclude almost this amount from income in America. We have literally thousands of provisions in our tax code that we don't tax. And so, if we want to lower the tax rates for everybody, we've got to rethink whether we need these provisions. So we have to decide, do we keep provisions that benefit a few, or do we lower rates for everybody? That's really the trade-off in tax. It's not an easy one, but that's really the challenge. Small businesses shouldn't pay higher taxes than big business. We ought to stop encouraging companies from shifting jobs around the world. We ought to limit spending, strengthen the economy. That's how we pay down the debt. And finally, key principle for me in tax reform, it should not raise taxes to bail out Washington's spending problems. Washington has a huge spending problem. We need to deal with that. Next chart. Individual rates. Reminder, we've got 7 different rates that you and I pay, and many of our small businesses pay, starting at 10% and then 15%. And as you know, as taxpayers, you know this, but just a reminder, sort of like a car wash. You pay each of those rates on the way up. You pay 10% of the first amount, 15% the next, 20% the next. But on paper, it's hard to read that from here, but it says our top rate is 39.6%. But really, if you look out to the right, the increases from the president's taxes this year, and then the Obamacare tax increases. Really, the highest rate is 44.6%. You say, well, so what? Well, this is important because Texas doesn't have an income state tax, thank goodness. Many states do. You add their state taxes. For a lot of families, a lot of small businesses in America, the highest rate is over 50%. What that means is that the government has a greater claim over your work than you do. Think about it. Every hour you work, every tough decision you make, every time you spend away from your family to try to succeed, the government has a greater claim over your hard work and thrift and savings than you do. I think that's unfair with the tax code as well. Next. The top rates are increasing. This chart looks a little complicated, but start on the left side. Those are the individual rates. Before President Reagan, the top rate was 70%. It was a huge amount. President Reagan lowered it to 28%. And then it went up to 35%. Now it's 44.6%. It's headed the wrong direction. After that, the red, sort of maroon bars, our capital gains. That's important for investing long-term in our economy. President Reagan kept it 28%. I was part of the team on Ways and Means. We lowered those rates to 15%. But look where it's going. It's headed back up to over 23%. The green bars are dividends. These are really important to our seniors, besides Social Security. And as you know, your CDs don't get you anything anymore. Thank you, Ben Bernanke and the Federal Reserve. Because of that, dividends are really important to seniors. Every dollar matters. President Reagan lowered it from 70 to 28. I was part of the team that lowered it further to 15, but look where it's going. It's headed up 23% and up. The light blue bars at the right there, that's the corporate rate. And as I mentioned, it stayed the same. Our competitors are lowering those. Next chart. So, what's changed since 1986? What's different today as we look at fixing this broken code? The main thing is fewer and fewer Americans are shouldering the tax burden. In the tax cuts, over 5 times that's happened since the 80s, we've actually shifted more and more taxes onto fewer and fewer people. In Washington, they call that being progressive. You have a progressive tax code. And now, over the years, we now become the most progressive tax code in the world. Next chart, please. This is kind of hard to read from here, but you know, the way they sort of divide us Americans into income is by 1/5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this chart shows from 1980 to about today where each 1/5 is paying. So you can tell the bottom and the second quintiles, the bottom and second 1/5, they're paying less than they did in 1980. The middle income, middle quintile, middle fifth, paying less, thank goodness, than the 1980s. Even the upper middle income are paying less. But look, the top 1%, more and more. The top bar, the blue bar at the very highest, that represents 1 out of 5 Americans that succeed or in that tax bracket. They now pay 94% of taxes. So you've got 1 out of 5 people paying almost all the taxes in America. Next chart. Sort of another way of looking at it. I know you think I'm getting paid by the chart. I'm not. I'm just trying to help show it. You look over toward the right, the top 1%. Because people often say, look, people aren't paying their fair share. People who succeed need to pay more. Dominic, look at that. Top 1% are already shouldering 37% of all the taxes. The top 5%, almost 60% of all the taxes. The top 10%, over 70%. Next chart, I promise I won't do more of these. If you go from the left, the first and second quintiles, people working their way up the economic ladder, actually get taxes back. They're trying to work their way up. Middle income, so many of us are in it, earn 15% of all the wages in America, the income, pay about 3% of the taxes. That's good. Fourth quintile earns about 23% of the income, pays about 13%. But here's that fifth, that 1/5 again. They're super earners. They earn 50% of all the income, but they're paying 94% of the taxes. And so, in the next chart, you'll see, when you look at all of our countries around the world, France and Italy and Spain, even Greece, we think, boy, those people tax everyone to the nth degree, but we actually tax higher for fewer and fewer people. The point of that is, it's pretty tough if you keep killing that golden goose. You keep heaping more and more on fewer and fewer shoulders. That's not an economy that will grow. That's not a country that's going to grow. Next, please. What else has changed? More small businesses are filing like you and I do as individuals. When President Reagan reformed it, most companies really were filing as corporations. Today, there are so many, many of them are on the individual side. Next chart, you can tell here the partnerships, the small corporations, they're all filing as you and I do. Next chart. What else has changed? more exemptions, more loopholes, more deductions. The code's more complex. So while we're collecting this amount, there's more and more of these exemptions and provisions since President Reagan took office, or took reform. Some of them, next chart, I wouldn't call these loopholes. These are parts of the tax code that are big parts of it. Many of them we rely on. When your company contributes to your health care or insurance, that's excluded from taxation. Tax deduction for home mortgage, very important in America. How we save for retirement. Our charitable donations to our churches and our local organizations. We exempt them for a purpose, to encourage more of them. Those are parts of the code that we exempt. Next chart. For businesses, you know, how you buy a piece of equipment and then you write it off. How you do your research that we encourage with certain exemptions. How you do your accounting is exempted from key parts of this. I'm not saying these are loopholes, but they're an example of the thousands of provisions that are in the code, but we've got to look at all of them. Next, please. So what are our options? There's really two ways for a country to tax. You can tax on consumption, how you buy things. You can tax on income, how you earn things. On consumption, on what you buy, some of the big options are value-added tax. If you've ever been to Europe or Canada, you pay this. And this is a tax that is a small number, but it's added to every step of a product. It can be, for this lectern, for this podium, the first company that bought the acrylic and started to shape it would pay a tax on between what they bought that raw material and then when they shaped it. When they sent it to the next company to be assembled and put together and the top put on it and shined up, that company paid a small tax on the value they added to this lectern. And then when it gets shipped to the store and someone comes in and buys it, that purchaser pays the tax on the value that was added to this product. Small amount, lots added over time. Consumer ultimately ends up paying a good portion of it. The VAT, as they call it, economists love this tax, by the way. And in Europe and other countries, politicians love this tax because it's a hidden tax, because you don't see it. But it adds up and adds up and adds up. And one of my fears is if you introduce any new tax into America, they'll keep the old ones as well. They never seem to subtract. And so the VAT tax has got a lot of attention around the world. Whether it's right for America, I don't believe it does. The national retail sales tax, the fair tax, is another way to tax consumption. And this is gathering a lot of momentum, the fair tax is, because it's the only tax that does abolish the IRS from our lives. What it does now, this tax replaces all the others. Replaces the income tax families pay and business pay. It eliminates the payroll tax. Your Medicare, Social Security comes out of your paycheck. It eliminates the death tax, for example, and replaces all of that with one retail sales tax. It's paid one time, the first time a product is bought at retail. Not in business, when you buy something for your business or you buy it to improve your business, one time when it goes across that cash register. It's never taxed again. Used anything are never taxed. That tax goes on top of the 8-cent sales tax we have today. So, it's a bit of a sticker shock, as far as taxation. It does eliminate the other income and all the other taxes. One of the things unique about the fair tax is that to try to make sure it's fair for the poor and those who don't have high incomes or even middle class income, they have something that's pretty unique. It's called the prebate. It's like a rebate, but it goes out ahead. And what it does is it gives families the dollar to pay that sales tax up to the level of poverty. So a family of 4 here in South Montgomery County would have their sales taxes given to them up to their first about $25,000 of purchases each year. would be in effect tax exempt from this. That's an effort to try to make sure that those who have the least income aren't hit the hardest by the tax. There are 70 sponsors of this bill in the House, 7 in the Senate. Full disclosure, I'm a sponsor of this tax. I really think it's pretty bold for a lot of people in Washington, but I really think if we started from scratch and we designed a tax system that was fair, that politicians couldn't gain, that pushed power out of Washington, where you knew the person next to you was paying the same as you. You knew folks in the black market were paying the same as you. You knew tourists coming to America, 300 million a year, were helping fund the government. I think if we started from scratch and really had a discussion, this is the tax we would go to. We've got a lot of work, and I'll tell you, I have worked, Rob Woodall, Congressman from Georgia, leads this effort. We've are offering to have this scored by the Joint Tax Committee, try to understand more about it. A lot of work has to be done in the education of this, no question. None of these taxes are perfect. None of these that I'll describe are. They all have pros and cons. I think we ought to keep having a discussion about the sales tax going forward. And then the expenditure tax, please ignore it. I hope you never do it. Next chart. Income. You know, how we earn things. The two big options, the flat tax, H.R. 1040, that's led by a Texan, Dr. Michael Burgess out of Fort Worth. In fact, he followed Dick Armey, the famous leader of the flat tax. But his has a little bit of an extra twitch in it. He proposes a flat tax that's 19% for the first 2 years and 17% after that. I'm not sure why he stair-stepped it. But it's optional. What he proposes is that every American gets to choose. You can choose to pay taxes under the code we have today, or you can choose a flat rate of 19 or 17%. But you couldn't go back and forth. You made one choice, you stick with it through your lifetime. There's about 10 sponsors of this in the House, but a flat tax, just because the appeal of having one rate, not having all that's pretty appealing to a lot of Americans. And then finally, in the House budget, Republicans have passed the last 3 years the only budget in Washington that actually balances, and the only budget whose goal and path is not just to balance, it's actually to make America debt-free. Which, by the way, we need to set higher goals. Balancing the budget is not good enough. We need to pay down this net. We need to be a country that's debt-free, the strongest economic country in the world. That ought to be the goal going forward. So in this budget, Ways and Means Committee has been asked the last 3 years to just lay out a framework. Tell Republicans, how Reagan-style reform would work. And so in our House budget, and one of the options we're looking hard at is Reagan-style reform. It would take all those 7 rates, individual rates, and simplify them to 2. Most Americans would pay a 10% tax rate. Other higher earners would pay 25 to 28%. So it would be close to the Reagan rates, but fewer different tax rates. The corporate rate would be lower, would be better than President Reagan at 25%. We would do away with that worldwide tax. Now that doesn't make us the best tax rate in the world, but if you listen to our businesses here, what they tell me is, look, you don't need to be the lowest rate on the planet, just don't be the highest rate on the planet. And if you'll not tax us everywhere in the world, just give us a level playing field, we can compete and win against China, against Europe, anybody. So the Reagan approach does exactly that, ends that worldwide tax, so we don't encourage companies to shift jobs and research and other things overseas. Small businesses would pay similar rates as corporations. We eliminate in this proposal the alternative minimum tax That was the tax supposedly for 55 or so wealthy families. It grew and grew and grew and grew, and if we'd allowed it to become law, we blocked it on New Year's Day. If we'd have allowed it to expand the way it was designed, almost 30 million middle-class Americans would have paid a second tax they had no idea was there. When this whole tax is based on, if we don't get you the first time, we'll get you the second time. And so this proposal eliminates it. Finally, I know I keep coming back to this, but it doesn't raise taxes. It doesn't bail out the spending problems in Washington. Next chart, please. We're serious. The reason I wanted to at least lead off this town hall with this is because we are serious about taking the first steps to change, fix this code. In September, after we go back, we're going to keep working mid to late September, thereabouts. We're going to lay down the first complete rewrite of the tax code since 1986. We hope in October, after we get feedback, and I hope to get it from you, sometime in October, to pass that through the House Ways and Means Committee that I serve on, and we hope we can pass it through the U.S. House later this year. Will the Senate act? We don't know. They tell us that they want to do tax reform this year as well, but they have a big problem. Republicans don't want to raise taxes, nor should they, or extra revenue. Our Democrat friends over there want to raise $1 trillion of higher taxes. How they figure that out, I don't know. What's the president going to do? I don't know. What he said, yes. What the president has said is he wants to lower rates for corporations, but not for individuals and small businesses. That seems unfair. It seems to me they all ought to go down at the same time. So I don't know what he's going to do, but we've decided we're just going to lead. We're going to put this tax reform out. We're going to push this ball down the field. We're going to see who else engages. The reason I wanted to start these town halls with you ahead of the national media, they're not paying attention to this, you're not reading about us, because I need your ideas and input as we go forward. I want you to be better informed in congressional districts in America about this issue so you can give me your best thoughts. And I also, selfishly, I want you engaged because there's plenty of folks in Washington, they like the tax code just the way it is. They've got their special provision. It fits them perfectly. So if we're going to change it, lower rates for everybody and simplify it, it's going to take the grassroots to do it. And so we also, by the way, we did 3 drafts of key parts, small businesses, international businesses, for the last year and a half so we can get more input. We held 11 tax working groups, Republicans and Democrats together, on key issues from how do we save, how do we buy our homes, how do we give charitable deductions, how do we raise capital for businesses. I led the energy tax working group because I've been charged with the energy portion of the tax code. We have to get this right. Energy's in the computer revolution of its day. We have a chance to change the future of America for our kids, and actually have game-changing in the world. I want to make sure no one in Washington blocks energy from reaching its potential, American-made energy. So that's the area I believe. We even created, with the Senate Finance Committee, taxreform.gov. We've had 10,000 submissions and no one even knows it's there. But what we're determined to do is not do this in secret, but do it out and try to gain as much input as possible. Final slide, we'll stop. So the questions I have for you. What do you think is the biggest problem with the tax code today? What is the most wrong, objectionable with the way you're taxed in your family and business? Should Congress act now? And I hope the answer is yes to that. What do you want for priorities in a new tax code? Is it simpler? Is it fair? Is it flatter? Is it lower rates? Is it all the above? Would you consider, would you support lowering or eliminating some deductions and loopholes in order to lower tax rates? And I say some because certainly not all of these provisions that are important need to go away. But a number of them do if we want to lower the rates. And then finally, should tax reform raise taxes? Should it be allowed spending in these? And so, Paul, where are you at? Again, with your permission, can I stop? Thank you. Can I stop and let's take some questions, thoughts, issues. After we do this, then we can talk about anything else you want. Terry, there's the microphone. Patrick's got it.
You know, I think if we don't eliminate the IRS up front with all this, all the nibbling around the edges that we're talking about doing, even with the fair tax, which I support, is going to go to naught. If you drive down the deductions, take away the deductions, done during the Reagan era also, and over the years now they've crept back up. All the deductions we used to have in the 80s, interest deduction on credit cards, and just dozens of different things are all gone. So if you don't jerk out the IRS by its roots and eliminate those unionized federal employees who are crucifying conservatives and taxpayers, we're just going to keep doing this over and over. They've got to be ripped out. You're losing all the black market revenue you're talking about. We've got all the compliance costs. That all goes away with the sales tax, with the fair tax. And if you just go to a national sales collection agency like the state has and take the power away from those people, because they're just going to crucify us if we don't. We'll continue to do it.
Thanks, Terry. Terry's small business person. Carol's got a microphone right up there.
I'm not a big fan of Washington because we've been through this drill before. We reduce our taxes, we level the playing field, and 5 years, 10 years down the road, spending continues to increase, stuff creeps back into the tax code, and the problem is continually there. Changing the tax code to me is simply window dressing. Spending is a problem. Entitlement spending is a problem. We have to fix that first. I'm a veteran of the United States Army. I spent 21 years and it's interesting how every time there's a spending problem in the United States, the first people that are hit are the retirees, the people on Medicaid, Medicare, and the military. And it's happening to me right now because of Obamacare. My health care plan is being thrown out the window. That's a promise the government made to me. Now I can't get health care in the Woodlands. I have to get on the road and travel.
Because no one will accept that plan.
Absolutely.
I know.
That's the thanks I get because everybody else is getting a free ride. It needs to stop.
Yep. Well said. Peyton, right there, this young woman.
I am one of the self-employed individuals paying higher taxes, so definitely support the leveling of taxes. But on the fair tax, how would the home purchase be handled in that what's proposed?
In what purchase?
In the fair tax and the sales model. How is home purchase handled?
Home purchase, like online?
No, to buy a home. To
I'm
purchase
sorry.
a home.
Sales tax is applied to that as well the first time it is purchased. It is delegated over the 30-year mortgage of that home. It's not applied for a resale. You don't pay taxes on the resale of a home. That's probably shocking, but here's one thing to consider. Whether it's your home or this podium or anything you buy, all the taxes we pay now are embedded in the price of that home. Payroll taxes for every worker, the income taxes for the business, the cost of the accountants and the IRS compliance in that. In the sales tax, the studies they've run show that a product in general in America, 20 to 25% of that product are all those hidden taxes and costs in it. And so the belief is that if you eliminate those taxes out of it, that the products that you buy will be much cheaper by some portion of that. Now, there's skepticism. People say, look, those prices aren't going down. One thought is that we live in the internet world, anything we want to buy, we can compare across this country, across the world if we want. And so if a few companies are trying to keep 20 to 25% extra cost in the product, I guarantee you there's a lot of other companies that will undercut that in order to get the business. So I think we've got the opportunity to also lower the cost of these products that we buy as well. And then, as you know, you keep your whole paycheck. You know, you don't have Medicare, you don't have Social Security, you don't do withholding. So keep all your paycheck as you make those purchases.
Thank you. I also feel strongly that overtaxing those that make a lot more, and I'm not one of those individuals, is detrimental to our economy. Those are the people who are very talented often and can create more jobs as stimuli, but there's a disincentive towards doing that once you start getting to those higher tax brackets. Those are people that can put money back into creating new enterprises. Thank you.
We ought to be encouraging more of that, not less of that. Thank you. I'll tell you what, we'll go here and then over on your side. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. You spoke several times. I've heard this term many times. What the heck is a fair share, by the way? Do you know? You don't know.
Do you know?
No, I don't know. I don't know what a fair share is. And then I look around and I wonder, how many of these people in here would you say were afraid of the income tax? Anybody? Anybody afraid?
Afraid of the IRS?
IRS, yes. Maybe, okay. Now, would you be surprised to find out that IRS has no jurisdiction in this state? And I know you're going to say, oh yeah, but they're down here all the time. That's right, they're here all the time, but they don't have that jurisdiction. Neither does the FBI. And they have to be invited in order to get down here to get the jurisdiction. Now, there's a couple of things. Are you familiar with the 6209 manual?
No, sir.
Sorry about that.
I'm still stuck back on the did I invite the IRS in the Texas part. So I'm just thinking, can I take the invitation back?
Yes, you can. If you've got the guts to do it. The situation is, if they call you on the phone, let's say you go in and cash a check at the bank. Well, usually is the first question, unless they know you real well. They want to see your identification. Try to get that from an IRS agent. Ask him for his driver's license. Ask him for his delegated letter of authority. Where did he get what he's been doing down here? He wants to audit you. I don't mean to take up some time, but it's interesting to me the fact that everybody in here that files a tax return signs an oath at the bottom. And they sign it under penalty of perjury. Now, why would a guy want to call you and check your return if you've already signed under penalty of perjury? Can't you ask him what's wrong? Just simple little things like that. And ask him if he's got this letter of authority that I talked about. And by the way, that's the same thing up there in Washington, D.C. now. If they called and asked the agent in wherever it is, Minnesota or something, asked him if he had a delegated letter of authority, and he produced it, the guy that signed it is the guy you're looking for. It's a very simple question to ask.
Let's do this. Thank you for your comment. That's a lot of new information. We'll be glad to check it. Carol, right here, come over here.
Have y'all given thought about taxing yourselves for redundant bills? How many times have you voted down or voted to repeal Obamacare? You're wasting our time, you're wasting our money. That's our hard-earned money that we're paying you guys to blow. How about taxing you at 10 or 20% each time you continue to pass these stupid bills that have no prayer of going anywhere?
If you want to tax me 100% for trying to repeal this, repeal Obamacare, tax me over and over again.
And you know what? Of repealing Obamacare at this point. We're right at that line in the sand.
Can I finish, please? Please finish.
I think I'm probably finished. But we could probably pay off the national debt if we charged the House every time they kept putting this bill up and passing it, and it goes nowhere.
How about we tax the Senate every year they don't pass a budget? I confess, I've been in this fight against Obamacare for 4 years. You've seen the chart of the health care new law that my joint economic committee that I had put together, because along this country and lawmakers see how this bill works. Today we know not a single promise for that law has been kept. From that it would save you $2,500. So as the gentleman said, you can keep the health insurance you have. You see the prices that are coming out from states. Half the states don't have exchanges. They don't want anything to do with it. More than half states aren't exchanges. Mr. President, please, you'll have to look. That was the NSA, I'm sorry. People are not getting the help they deserve. This thing right now is 6 weeks away from open. And we've already seen small businesses that cut hours for workers below 29 hours. They are laying workers off. Some have said we're never hiring a full-time worker again. That's been delayed a year, which doesn't solve the problem, helps a little. So that mandate's been delayed, but the workers, that mandate that everyone in here by government through health care will pay a tax on January 1st, that hasn't been delayed. And that's unfair. The Warren Buffett and Donald Trump get a delay, but average taxpayers, average workers, you don't. And so I'll tell you in the House, we don't straight up, we don't fund Obamacare. We've funded $55 billion out of that awful law, and if we get a chance to fund every dime out of it, we're going to do it. And right now, in the Senate, I'm sorry to get on the soapbox, but this is the wrong solution for our country. And in the Senate today, besides the bill to fully repeal, there's a bill to stop all of the taxes and all the mandates. I wish someone in the Senate would fight for that. We've passed out of the House a bill that removes the IRS completely and totally out of Obamacare and our medical lines. I want someone in the Senate to fight for that. We've passed a bill to delay the mandate on workers and families. I want someone over there to fight for that. Because we've been in this fight a while. We could use someone else in the boxing ring, frankly, with us. It's been 2 against 1 for a while. We could use a little help, to be honest. Congress exempting itself. Perfect. Can I tell you one backstory? When they proposed this law, I'm on Ways and Means Committee, healthcare. I now lead healthcare in Ways and Means Committee. But at the time, they presented to us, Charlie Rangel, chairman, at about 9 o'clock at night, about 1,200 pages of new law. Never seen it before. About 2 o'clock that morning, they sent us an amendment that was about 300 or 400 pages. Never seen it before. We were asked to start voting at 9 o'clock. No one knew what was in the bill. First amendment that Republicans offered was that if Obamacare is good enough for the rest of America, it's good enough for every member of Congress. Every Republican voted for it. Every Democrat opposed it because they said members of Congress needed choices. That's what they said. At the end of the day, Charles Grassley from Iowa did get in an amendment that puts all rank and file lawmakers like me in Obamacare. That is the law. Curiously, the committees that wrote the bill exempted themselves. But the president, before he left Terry for vacation, directed his agency, the Office of Personnel Management, while they left us in Obamacare, that didn't change. He allowed the contributions we get from our employer to count toward the cost of health care. We don't get premiums, but count toward it. No one else in America gets that treatment. And so we've already introduced legislation to reverse what the president is trying to do. And secondly, I see this as an opportunity. Dave Camp, the chairman of the Ways and Means, and I have introduced legislation that puts the White House, all federal workers, including the head of the IRS, in Obamacare. And I want to ask that if everyone's got if it's good enough for you, it's good enough for all these workers, federal workers as well. So my point is, let's not just reverse it. Let's take the opportunity to add even more to it. So, Carol, come on over. She's going to hang on that microphone.
My name is Ben, and you were talking about cutting some expenditures. There's only one Savior of the world, and since I'm in church, I can use the word Jesus. Amen. We are not the Savior of the world. We might go out there and take care of the medical needs and starvation and so forth. But the rest of it, I think they ought to just leave them alone and let them fight it out for themselves. We send our soldiers over there, and we get nothing for it but hatred. Now,
and you're thinking Egypt, Syria, right. All of that.
All of it. Thank you. Afghanistan and Iraq and the whole rest. We were supposed to get oil from Iraq for what we did over there, but we got nothing yet. But my lead into this, by mentioning the word Jesus, I found out that the president has told the veterans that they cannot, the chaplains that went to visit the veterans cannot carry any religious articles, Bible, prayer books, rosaries, any of that stuff into the hospitals. Now it's moved into the campsite, so go into the chapel. You can say Jesus in the chapel, but you can't say it outside the chapel. And you can't have a Bible or any prayer books or anything on your desk. Now this is getting ridiculous. So, you know, Hitler started this. We stood by and watched the Jews get marched away. Now it's our turn. So who's going to stand up for us if we don't? So are we going to stand by or are we going to stand up?
I'm going to stand up. A group of us House conservatives has jumped into this issue right off the bat with letters. We were asking for hearings. We're going to fight this because it doesn't happen all at once. It's incremental. You know what I mean? Just remove it. Remove the chance for faith and expression. Remove it until the day you have a government that targets conservative organizations who believe in free speech and less government and pro-Israel and pro-life. Until you have the day the IRS targets people to try to silence their voices, we're exactly already where you fear we'll be because of these types of actions. And so you're right on target. We'll keep fighting. Thanks, sir. We'll do that, and then we'll come down over here. Yes, sir.
Hello. So, right now we have a piece of legislation in the Senate and the House to reinstate the Glass-Steagall separation of investment banks from commercial banks. What we also have is a financial monopoly, a dictatorship of the biggest banks on the planet, which are getting $85 billion a month for a bailout that will never happen. They have 1.4 quadrillion in derivatives bets, which are bets on the values of stocks. Total gambling, nothing real there. These big banks, JP Morgan, HSBC, Bank of America, they know that they're never going to be able to be solvent. But right now they own Obama, and they own a lot of members of Congress. And the question I have to you is, will you sign on to Glass-Steagall to put this banking system through a reorganization, open up the books of these banks? People are going to be going to jail, which is wonderful. And then we can free our government to actually rebuild this nation in a serious way. Will you sign on and champion Glass-Steagall as the #1 thing to do before we have another meltdown, where Dodd-Frank says they can steal from your deposits like in Cyprus, as they're entitled to? The same people that wrote Dodd-Frank are the people that are now going around the country trying to stifle Glass-Steagall. So the question is, will you sign on support, or will you not stand up, either through money, intimidation, to the powers that be that are actually protecting the criminal in the White House right now?
You are right. The answer is you are right on the problem. You're wrong on the solution. So no, I will not be supporting reinstating Glass-Steagall. It didn't prevent wouldn't have prevented this crisis. It won't prevent the next crisis. What I think we need to do, Dodd-Frank basically enshrined too big to fail. It's now allowed the bigger banks to get bigger and bigger. Ask your smaller community banks, ask your regional bank, how hard they're paying the price for all of this crisis. And so I think the real answer is to repeal all the too big to fail support in Dodd-Frank. I want banks, we have legislation, not me personally, conservatives do, that ends that part of Dodd-Frank. It requires big banks to go through bankruptcy, to suffer the same consequences as any other business in America. So they don't get a political bailout, they don't get a financial bailout. I think that's the right answer. And I'll dovetail with one other thing. The financial crisis had plenty of blame to go around. At the heart of it was greed at almost every level of the process. But Washington had a big role to play in this by keeping interest rates too low, too long, encouraging more and more borrowing, encouraging banks and others to lend to people who could never hope to pay it back. I mean, when you have one of our community bankers here who was traveling to another country, getting his hair cut, he always likes to listen to somebody, to people talk, and this beautician was cutting his hair. She happened to be in Las Vegas. And she said, well, you're a banker, can I ask your advice? I said, sure. She said, my friend and I are looking at buying 2 homes. They're each about $600,000. You know, we think we can make money on it. Do you think we ought to do it? And he's sitting there in the chair thinking, 2 $600,000 homes. There's no possible way you can afford that. The problem is, across America, we allow people who could buy homes that could never afford to pay it back. They didn't have any business buying homes like that. We allowed credit agencies to rate all this as AAA when everyone should have known better. We let companies securitize it, sell it out, pretend it was all valid, and then the government backed it all up. So government has a big role to blame in that crisis. Too big to fail, allowing that to occur again and us to be on the taxpayer to be on the hook is absolutely wrong. And so I think respectfully, I know what you're talking about. We visit with folks all the time in Washington who want Glass-Steagall repealed or put back in place. I've looked at it hard, respectfully. I don't think it solves the problem.
Yeah. The way you answer that question is the same answer that Barney Frank gave, who was owned by the bankers.
No, he didn't.
Yes, fact, he did. That's exactly what he said.
No, in
it
fact,
never worked.
He certainly, sir, I don't want to interrupt, but Barney Frank didn't urge repeal of Dodd-Frank. I can pretty much assure you of that. Barney Frank, unlike me, did not urge repealing Dodd-Frank. That's what I'm saying. Repeal Dodd-Frank and all the too big to fail protections that are.
Well, I have a question for you, Congressman. Will you support the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall, or will you sacrifice the future of your constituents who will be doomed to a life of no pensions, no health care, no jobs in order to bail out a bunch of Wall Street scoundrels who have looted every city, county, and state and country to bail out their worthless gambling debts?
You said that probably a little better than her, but the answer would be no, sir.
First of all, thank you, Congressman, for coming here and sharing with us and being open-minded. I'm going to switch it up a little here. I'm not a big Glass-Steagall guy, but what I am seeing, and thank you for bringing up tax reform, and thank you for bringing up protecting our borders, and thank you for bringing up these many things that plague us all, including big banks. If we aren't on our toes and aren't ready for November in 2014, all the work that this man does and his brethren that do good will go nowhere. Because if we cannot change the political makeup in the Senate we are all wasting our breath. If we don't convince those in blue states that we know, that we care about, that they need to educate themselves, take a look around, and begin to prepare, what needs to happen is to vote. And we need an educated electorate in 2014. So these great ideas that we all have, and these things that we know we must do to change this nation, will go nowhere if we don't get out and vote correctly in the midterm. And I just want to urge all of you to tell everyone you know, not just Texas, we know how we'll vote. That's not the problem. There's other people that we know in other states, and we need to encourage them to take a good long look at where they're at today and where they could be. And educate your friends and your neighbors so we can get something accomplished, so he can get something accomplished as we send him to Washington to do the job that we've appointed him to do. So I just want to encourage you and encourage everybody to get out and tell people to vote in 2014 so we can change the Senate, so we can get something done.
Mr. Brady, this question is on behalf of Paul Watson. He says, right now there are two issues that have the greatest possibility of destroying our country quickly and permanently, and they are Obamacare and so-called immigration reform. Since the Supreme Court ruled Obamacare to be a tax, I assume your committee now has some degree of oversight. We are hearing a lot of Republicans' voices with different opinions on how to deal with Obamacare. Do you support any of those options, in whole or in part, that are being presented right now? If not, what actions do you support to put an end to the Obamacare threat?
Yeah, a great question. With the House and Senate, the White House, the way it is, full repeal is difficult, if not impossible, until we change the Senate, until we change that White House. But there's an awful lot more we can do. So far, again, we've defunded $55 billion already. The White House is robbing Peter to pay Paul. They're taking from accounts that have nothing to do with this to try to implement it because we have starved it out. But that's not enough. The only way to fully defund Obamacare, fully defund it, is to fully repeal it. Even shutting down the government won't stop Obamacare. It's like Social Security or Medicare. Shut the government down, those programs, because the taxes keep going and the subsidies keep flowing out of it. And even the court has said the workers on Obamacare and Social Security and Medicare are essential, so they all stay in place. And so even whether you believe in shutting the government down or not, it doesn't solve the problem. Repeal does. Here's what we can do in the interim. Right now, that individual mandate, on New Year's Day, the fact you're forced to buy government-approved health care, pay a tax, is the single most unpopular part of Obamacare. That bill now has passed the House, it's in the Senate. I believe they can pass that bill, push this whole thing back. Removing the IRS completely and totally out of enforcing Obamacare, which, by the way, almost stops that by itself, is again out of the House and sitting in the Senate. I think with Americans of all stripes fearful of the IRS targeting for them, I believe that bill can be passed as well. That almost brings it to a screeching halt. I think eliminating not just the taxes, but this rationing board, the Independent Payment Advisory Board, which over time, Obamacare is going to run out of money. We're going to start robbing Peter to pay Paul. And the way they do it is they don't ration care to you. They just don't pay your doctor or hospital for treating you. They say, well, this isn't rationing. But the bottom line is you don't get the treatment you need when you need it. That, too, is hugely unpopular with Republicans and Democrats. Again, past the House, it is sitting in the Senate. I believe there's 3 or 4 key measures that could throw the wrench in this in a significant way and buy us enough time to where we can either get a Senate or a White House where we can pull this thing out by the roots. My biggest fear is that we stop fighting. Some people said, well, this is our last chance. I don't buy that. I don't buy that. We're going to keep fighting this thing because it is wrong. It's not Republican or Democrat. It's wrong for families, and it's wrong for businesses. And so I'm just keep fighting, and there's a whole lot of conservatives in the House that believe we're going to fight this thing, but there's just nothing left to fight. And so that would be that was a long answer to Paul's question, but that's how I feel. How about right here? Excuse me.
Hello. I know you've been really busy in Washington with all the funny scandals, as you had the IRS, you had Benghazi in the past few years. So I just want to encourage you as you do the town halls and when you go back and feed back to them. I mean, Obamacare got passed when, 57% of Americans did not want it. I heard Trey Gowdy had a great line, that he passed Obamacare without a Republican vote, and let him see if he can fund Obamacare without a Republican vote. So, I just, and then I hear, I get so excited when I see conservatives come on. You have the Rubio's coming up, and Ted Cruz, I love him. Yeah. And I see all these people coming up, and then Rubio, yesterday, that we need to pass immigration because he'll do a executive order. No, we don't. We want to fight. Don't give in because he's going to do something. Yeah. And I just want to encourage you to go back and say they want us to fight, and just keep on fighting. And thank you for all that you do. And
you got it. Thank you. This one had her hand up for a while. I'll come back to this one.
Could you just let us know what's up with the immigration reform situation?
Yeah.
I guess I'm worried that the House is going to come up with some small bills, some of which seem acceptable, then it'll go to the conference. And what will come out is something that's actually tolerable to a few of the House Republicans, enough to put it over the edge that we're going to end up with some monstrosity that none of us want.
Yep. No, great question.
Just let us know what's
up. Thank you. This will be a big issue as we go back. One, does anyone in this room think that the status quo is fine? That having and ignoring 11 million immigrants here is okay? That we have a leaky border? Hold on. We have a leaky border. It's not just a security risk. Drives up costs for healthcare and education, law enforcement. And even when we need workers to fill in some of the gaps, and we have some gaps in our workforce, what we do as a country is we prioritize people by who they know, a relative, rather than what skills and commitment they can bring to America. I think all that's wrong with the way we do it today. That said, the gang of eight solution on the Senate, that's not the answer. I don't support that bill. It's flawed in so many ways. One, it doesn't secure the border. In fact, after all that money and after all that effort and after all that, the Congressional Budget Office tells us it only slows illegal immigration by half. Now think about it. After all they're doing, half will continue to come through the back door of illegal immigration. So in 10 years, Pastor, we're going to come back to your church and hold a town hall and say, what are we going to do about illegal immigration? It seems to me we ought to solve this issue. We ought to solve it right. The other flaws with the Senate bill, one of the keys are many people come to this country because they want to better their lives. They get jobs even though they're not here. We have businesses that work hard to make sure every worker on their payroll is legal. And they compete against companies that don't do that. And so it's unfair. We have people following the rules and others who don't. In the Senate bill, they don't demand that there be an accurate way for a local business to easily check that you have a legal worker for 10 years. They put off for 10 years the requirement that occur. It seems to me that should be done in a year or two. People who come here on visas, work visas, student visas, guest visas, all that, excuse me, almost half of those here illegally came through the front door on a visa. They chose to stay, expire their visas. But today we don't even track. We don't know if they left the country or not, literally blackballed. The Senate bill waits 10 years to put in place the technology that actually does a simple task of tracking them. And the example I always use why this is unacceptable, I was in Pennsylvania a year or so ago, a little campaign for a conservative candidate in Pennsylvania. I stopped in a rural town, and stop and go and got a Diet Coke. By the time I had returned my rental car, my wife was calling me on the phone asking, "Did you just buy something in Pennsylvania?" But first I said, "That's none of your business." No, I didn't say that. I said, "It's a Diet Coke here." But the point being, she can track exactly where it was and what I was buying. But we can't track people who come here on visas and have told us they will leave this country. I don't buy it. I think that can be done almost immediately. Finally, there's no independent verification in the Senate bill that the border really is secure. So you have the same government tasked with securing us telling us, "Don't worry, it's secure." I don't buy it. I want an independent group that you and I have confidence when they say 100% of the border is monitored and we're apprehending and returning at least 90%, so we're secure. I want to have some confidence in who does that. The Senate bill provides waivers, turns that back to the government. I think that's a mistake. Here's what I think is the solution. One, we've got to secure our borders first. I mean, it really is. And it's to make sure, both from security and both so that we don't repeat this problem again down the road, because this just keeps happening. Secondly, I want to secure the border. I want to measure the results of securing the border, not all the activity. The Senate, as you know, added an amendment by Senator Corker to add 20,000 new border agents, a bunch of new technology. That's great. Anyone in here know how many border agents it takes to secure the border? No. Is it 20,000? Is it 40,000? Is it 8,000? I don't know. What I know in business is that you actually measure whether you've done it or not. And I think we need to measure whether this border is secure independently. I mean, that's my view on border security. Until we do that and get it right, we ought not to move forward in other areas. Let's talk about workforce. The way we do things in the Senate bill, again, I think we need to train up American workers first. The jobs in America, there's going to be gaps. I mean, we all know in agriculture and construction, some of these tough jobs, as much as we want Americans to fill, they're not. They're just not. And so a guest worker program allows folks to work here. I don't have a problem. I just don't want Washington and the unions deciding which workers come here for guest workers. I want businesses to be able to make that. I want the free market to be able to make that decision. I think, too, right now, we have this backlog. I always talk about you have to close the back door of illegal immigration so you can keep open the front door of legal immigration. That front door, we have people who are actually trying to work here in America, become citizens, come through the front door. They're waiting years and years, spending thousands and thousands of dollars. They're trying to do it right. Why don't we clear the backlog of people who are actually trying to do it the right way? This visa lottery, where each year we literally, as a nation, we pick out 50,000 names from around the world, and we invite them to be citizens. Just 50,000 people around the world, invite them to be citizens. And then others, we give preference simply because of a relative, extended family, all that. I think our priority has to be for those who are committed to America, you know, who have skills, who want to both better themselves and better our country. That ought to be our priorities when you're talking about workers, I think. Because this whole issue isn't about immigration. It really is about America. I mean, that's what this issue is about. Then the final point, and the controversial part of this, is what do we do with the 11 million people who are here today? Honestly, do we believe 11 million people are going to be deported. I agree. I agree. So what do we do? In the Senate, this is what they've done. They've created over time a pathway to citizenship. Federal benefits going forward. There's some limitations, but for the most part, a pathway to citizenship over time if they do certain things. You know, I believe citizenship should be reserved for those who come through the front door of legal immigration. I think for those, whether they overstayed their visa or they chose to come through the back door, they may not have had a choice, but that's the choice they made. I think there has to be consequences for it. And for me, it seems to be that consequence would be the ability to have legal status in America. But without, okay, hold on, but without a pathway to citizenship and without federal benefits. You know, I know. But look, hold on a minute. Let's just finish this. Now, if we know as a nation, I mean, you tell me, honestly, if you think we're going to court already. If we're not, got it, hold on. We also have to have a discussion about if we're not granting citizenship or federal benefits to any of these workers, what are we going to do about the kids? You know, legitimate questions. Hold on. And so, gang, we're going to open up the floor for discussion. But my point is, to your original question is, in the House, we're not going to conference in order to accept the Senate bill. We're going to go security first. Until that's done right, there'll be no other action. And once we pass the security bill, we won't be going to conference unless there's already agreement on what the security is going to be. So the fear that we'll pass a tiny bill, you know, expand into the big one, we can see that track coming from 100 miles away. So, yep. So let's open it up for questions now. Thoughts? Yes, sir.
Thank you for coming, Congressman.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate all your work. I want to go back to Obamacare. You mentioned all these good bills that are coming up through the Senate are going to be passed.
Well, I hope.
Obama's just going to veto those. And they're going nowhere. That's not a solution. It seems to me the only leg you have to stand on is the tax angle and the appropriation angle. So why don't you want to stand up, and if he shuts the government down, he shuts the government down. Look, how is she going to stop it? Because he's going to veto anything else you're going to do.
And he's not going to veto any continuing resolution bill? Here's my problem, because I've been in this fight, and we've already explored this option, like years ago, as a way to stop Obama. This isn't new. It's new to a few senators. It isn't new to us in the fight. Shutting down the government doesn't stop that health care bill, period. And already, our Senate Republican friends, unfortunately, have already collapsed. They have already divided over this. They can't, right now, even stop Harry Reid from passing a continuing resolution. They aren't even together to do that. And so, I'll tell you, I'll go to every Alamo there is to stop Obamacare. But I think we ought to look for some battles of San Jacinto where we actually win, and we've got an opportunity, I think, to do serious damage to this law, whether this president tries to veto it, not by tackling the most unpopular, the worst parts of the bill, but actually he can't stand up against it. So it's not a question of whether we defund it, the question is what's the best way to do it. Yeah. The other thing that frustrates me, and maybe it does you, Republicans have got to work together on all these issues. I mean, it seems like we wake up each day not fighting the enemy, but just punching each other. And I think the White House and others, Democrats, just love what's going on. But tell you what, if we don't pull together and understand we're not going to get our country back, You know, if we're just divided and split, everyone's got their own idea, we got to figure out a way to do it together, my opinion. So, here's, yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, mine about something else. I'm a retiree, and one of the proposals afoot is to change our cost of living formula. Something called a change CPI. Are you familiar with that?
Oh, yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't think it's a very good way to do it. I'm on #2 Republican on Social Security Committee. I think there's much better ways to save Social Security. It is in trouble. It had to borrow $150 billion from China, the Federal Reserve, and others to just pay bills last year. It's never again going to break even. There's no money in that trust fund. We need to save Social Security. I think the answer is we're going to gradually have to raise the age from 67 to 70 over the next 35 years or so. Gradually, going to have to do it because people are living longer. And I think as you're earning your Social Security over the years, putting money in, I think we need a true cost of living based on real cost, an accurate cost of living. If we do those two things, we can actually save Social Security forever. And so the change CPI is a way to try to extend the life of Social Security in the short term, and there's no question it helps there. I think there are better ways to save that program. Yes, ma'am, go.
Is the Obamacare constitutional? I think that should be our very first bottom line question.
Well, we had pledged put our whole eggs in two baskets last year. One was that the Supreme Court would strike down that mandate that you had to buy government-approved health care. And we worried about what Justice Kennedy would do and rule. He got it exactly right, and Justice Roberts did not. And so they made that portion of the law constitutional. We still have some challenges. Oklahoma has got a challenge going on. And so the answer is, while the court has ruled it's constitutional, I don't believe it is. And we're still tracking a number of lawsuits to do. Started in the Senate? Well, they stripped out a House tax bill. So they technically made it work. So, yes, sir. I know you want to talk about immigration. Come on, I want to hear that, please.
Well, one of my concerns is the executive, that the president misuses the executive power. And he is as close, all he has to do is issue an executive order, and the immigration issue is over. And then you have more, maybe 11 million, maybe 20 million. I don't think anybody really knows what the real number is. My concern is if the president does that, he's going to wash. The thing that we're all concerned about is the integrity of the United States. We're concerned and we want to know that the Constitution and our freedoms that our generations before us fought for and believed in. When you have people that have no clue or idea of the freedoms that we're blessed with, you have this wash, and then you have these people voting for socialism, because if you give someone a handout, they want more and more and more. Another thing that I'm extremely frustrated is we have illegal immigrants here. Guess what? They use WIC, they use all these little welfare programs, and I appreciate, don't get me wrong, I have voted for you. I have now moved from calling myself a Republican to an independent conservative. Because I am tired of the rhinos in our party, McCain being one of them, and many others that are not physically very conservative. It's just by name. And I want people to stand up, and I do disagree with you as far as stopping the funding. I understand you're saying in the Obama health care law that there's something that just forces the spending regardless, is what I think you're trying to set.
The taxes and the spending continue, the subsidies continue regardless of whether you shut down the government. That's the point.
Okay. The other thing is the Republicans, for some reason, cannot articulate their positions clearly and why. And the thing is the press and all the liberals are defining you guys as the ones that are shutting down the government. The real reality, you're funding all of the other things. You're just doing what Democrats and Republicans want y'all to do, is to stand and cut that funding. And you can still do that if you'll just articulate and position yourselves of who you really are. You're letting them define you.
I agree. Sure, Carol, I'm sorry.
Thanks for coming on, Congressman. Let me start with good news. I'm very pleased to hear that you support the fair tax. If people aren't familiar with it, it started here in Houston, and owner of the Texans, Bob here, is one of the founders of the fair tax. So there's good books. Neil Bortz wrote two of them, and they're fabulous.
And you can just Google fair tax, it takes you right to the
fairtax.org. I have a question about immigration. You kind of tiptoed around it, and it seems a lot of progressives want to have a secondary status, like you had mentioned. My problem with that is you're going to get Chuck Schumer up there crying that we have second-class citizens in this country, and we need to make them full citizens. You must stand strong and not allow any changes to the laws and punish the criminals that are here, put tougher regulations on those who hire them, and they will self-deport.
I don't know what's not clear about, I don't support a pathway to citizenship for those who come through the back door of illegal immigration, but I'm not going to accept a gang of eights in a bill, period.
Yes. I would like to say, first off, God bless America. You know, we are such a blessed country. You ever travel the world, get on an airplane, you'll be telling yourself, God bless America, because we have what we have. Well, I'd ask you, Congressman, and I thank you for your time today, and obviously the involvement you have with Town Halls and getting people's different opinion. We as Americans must have an operating Congress, so I encourage you to move forward with this tax bill. We've got to have something that works. So you can't just be gridlocked all the time on every issue. It can't be Republicans versus Democrats or liberals versus conservatives. I happen to be a conservative, but I'm an American first. And I want you to take issues and don't forget that we've got to move towards something that we can get there. Can we get there all the time? I mean, we're going to be able to solve all these things? No, we have to have something we're working on that we can solve. I think the taxation, the fair tax, is an issue that we can start with that, because that has so much to do with everything else that we have. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Okay, I'm getting that up. Carol, yes ma'am, that'd be great. We'll be here till Sunday, Pastor, so I hope that's okay.
Will you work to replace the rhinos that are currently in charge in the House, like Boehner and Cantor, and get rid of those people?
You need to know something. Our leaders are as conservative as we will allow them to be. No, here's the point. We have to have 218 votes to pass strong conservative legislation. We do have a number of Republicans in districts held by Obama. You can call them moderates or not, but they're the difference between us holding this majority and Nancy Pelosi being Speaker of the House. They fight with us on including defunding Obamacare. They're with us on a lot of issues. There are times when, truthfully, on all ends of the spectrum, sometimes in the middle, where with the 17-vote margin, what's frustrating, just like with the Senate, when we don't unite, we do a terrible job of fighting for what we believe in. And the messaging is wrong as well, by the way. And I think, rather than fighting, again, throwing punches at each other, let's go with our principles. The ones that unite us all, including a smaller government, tax reform, a secure border. I mean, let's focus on our principles, not on what Chuck Schumer or the Democrats or the press want us to focus on. If we'll do that, I guarantee you, whether it's Boehner or Cantor or anyone else, we're going to be so much stronger than we are today. I actually believe that that's the biggest problem. We've got people running plays all over the place. No one is finding those core values and sticking with them. That's what I'm seeing. What's that? Well, he's a great guy. I mean,
And I mention that, I bring it up, I'll bet you that 90% of this audience doesn't know who he is.
Can I tell you?
If you do, I'm glad. Because he's a wonderful man, and he got Obama good.
There's a small group of us that hold, members of Congress that hold every Wednesday night a men's Bible fellowship. It's not just about, it's about keeping our faith and our family ahead of what's going on in Washington. Both with faith, because that is a tough town to turn the other cheek in, let me just tell you. Also, you got to fight for your family, because Washington just gobbles up family. You got to fight for it. Anyway, our team hosts the National Prayer Breakfast, and at the last one, I was sitting right in the middle, sort of from here to where the audio visual is right there, and watching Ben Carson speak. And the president was right over there where Carol is. And as I watched Ben Carson speak, well, you could see the president's jaw just tighten and tighten and tighten. You know, I'm sure something was getting torn up underneath him, but what I loved about it was not just the message, it was so clear, you know, and positive and hopeful, but the messenger mattered as well. You know, and that's one thing, you referenced the messaging. I'll tell you, conservatives, we can't just be angry. We may be angry at how things are going, but we've got to show this country that there is a much more positive vision for America, and not just for the ones who look like us. I'm still convinced that for minorities, for young people, for women, for others in this country, we give them the greatest opportunity, we give them the best chance to change their lives. And we're not giving them a life of food stamps and housing assistance. We're giving them a chance to own their own business, you know, to lead their own life. I mean, to pull themselves up the economic ladder. And part of our challenge, again, thanks for talking about messaging, is that we can't just be angry. We've got to paint a Ronald Reagan vision of what this country ought to be before we lose the whole country. And so I don't mean to go off on a rant, but I think that's one of our challenges as conservatives, certainly as Republicans.
We got to teach that Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton are not unyielding.
You know who I wish, I know we need to finish up, I will stay here for as long as you want so we can visit down here. Some of you have heard me talk about building Trio. Can I share that story with you? You know the Lone Star Honor Flight, you know, where we take World War II veterans up to see the memorial built in their honor. In Montgomery County, in this area, it was started by a middle school teacher in Montgomery, Brenda Bennett. And she decided she was going to put the group together because 1,000 veterans a day were dying from World War II. So she started asking her students if they wanted to help. Then the community of Montgomery, then all of Montgomery, and the Rotary clubs and the churches and everything. And so over time, they had 5 of these honor flights to Washington. Each of them occurred the same. They met at 4 o'clock in the morning in the dark at the Conroe Target on 105 there. And the buses would be there. The community was there. The Boy Scouts, the ROTC, everyone there to send the veterans off. The veterans each had a young escort because they're all in their 80s. And this is a long day. In Melbourne, each, after we put them on the buses, Patriot Guard riders would escort them by motorcycle down the bush. They'd get on a flight from United where the pilots and the flight attendants fought over who got to take them up to Washington, D.C. They would fly to Washington, they'd go to Texas Column, and they'd lay a wreath at the Texas Column. They would see some of the monuments on the mall, and then they would get on the plane and fly back home. It was a long day. They normally get it back here. about 2 o'clock in the morning. On every flight coming back, the same thing happened. All the young escorts, sneezing, all the veterans, chattering, talking away. I mean, they tell us it's one of the best days of their life. They're so humble. But on the 5th, every one of those honor flights, I would meet a veteran or a hero or more. And on the 5th and final flight, as they're getting on the buses, these 2 women come up and say, "Congressman, we'd like you to meet our dad. We think he's a real hero." So I went over with them. He was getting on the bus. I met their dad, Billy Trio, from Trinity, Texas. You know where Trinity's at? 1,000 folks at Lake Livingston. Turns out Billy Trio was the youngest serving Marine in World War II. He enlisted when he was 13 years old. He fought the Battle of Guadalcanal at 14 years old. 2 more battles, was seriously wounded in the Battle of Saipan, was hospitalized for 8 months, recovered, survived and recovered. He finished his full tour of duty 2 weeks shy of his 17th birthday. Finished his full tour of duty. I got to go up to Trinity that summer to the American Legion Hall there to present to Billy Trio the Purple Heart he earned in Saipan. And we were in the Legion Hall, and it's his friends and his veterans and community. We're all in awe of Billy, just in awe of him. He takes the microphone and basically says, "Look, I'm no hero. I'm just an American. This is what Americans do for each other. This is what we do for our freedom." The same time I was meeting Billy Trio, I met Sergeant Eddie Wright from here in Willis, Texas. You may have heard of Eddie. In 2004, a rocket-propelled grenade came into his vehicle, tore off both of his arms, right at his elbows, tore a hole in his left femur, he's bleeding out. Still, he gets his entire unit to safety. He decides, I'm not going to be a victim. He becomes, with his prosthesis, a hand-to-hand combat instructor in the Marine Corps. Now, he's since retired, just this handsome young man. You've heard of this group, Helping a Hero, that builds homes for our wounded warriors who were exceptionally damaged. And so, South Montgomery County came together to raise the last $80,000 for Eddie Wright's home. And so we're at a reception over in the Woodlands, and we're pretty excited about raising the final money. And Sergeant Wright takes a microphone. He doesn't pretend to be a speaker, but he takes it in his prosthesis. And what he said a lot of stuff. What I remember was he said, from time to time, someone will ask Norma if you could just go back to that day. I mean, and avoid that. If you miss the RPG, you have your arm, you have your life back together, wouldn't that be something? And he said, every time I'm asked that, my answer is the same, which is absolutely not. I wouldn't change anything. He said, the generosity of the American people, the appreciation that I received here at home, those who were so grateful for what I did, he said, in some ways I now know more about the freedoms I was fighting for than when I was fighting for them. And the only reason I like to remind us about Billy Trio and Eddie Wright is that if you're looking for the greatness of America in the size of its government, how many programs it has and many workers, you'll always be disappointed. If you look for the greatness of America and its people and its veterans and its service and its pastors and those of you who are really fighting to make sure your families in this community actually have a freedom in the life for your children and grandchildren, then we'll never be disappointed. We just need to stop looking to Washington for all the answers, because the real solutions are in this church and in you. So, God bless you. Thank you for being here tonight. We'll stay here for that.